So I wanted to talk about George Lucas and how, I feel like his movies have heart. Unlike the movies of today. And let me explain what I mean because, so there's George Lucas right there. Um, okay, so, his movies, his films are, I guess I'm specifically going to talk about Star Wars just because that's the most popular. But really, they're I feel like the difference between movies nowadays and movies of the past, but really I wanted to highlight George Lucas because, George Lucas, ultimately, I don't think that the modern audience truly understands what his movies are about. Like, I feel like, and it's not a matter that they can't see it. I think it's more that, people come to movies, they don't change. They bring themselves. The audience brings themselves to the film. And in today's world, where I think that, we are more connected in ways, especially, it's 2024 and we are more connected to, with social media and through trends. And so we have a little bit of a groupthink going on. And what ends up happening is that people are, they have an idea of what they think success looks like, what success looks like. Okay, so there's a Star Wars film, what success looks like or what it's supposed to be. But really, when you look at the character that Mark Hamill portrayed, okay, so Luke Skywalker, right? Luke Skywalker is supposed to be, okay, I think this is an interesting poster. Well, I'll talk about that later, but I guess Luke Skywalker is supposed to be he represents kind of the archetypal, the sort of the good guy, right? The guy who is young and trying to learn, sort of, George Lucas is trying to tell the story but at the end of the day, it's about good versus evil, right? But like, the idea is that, in many ways, these stories, they have kind of a gentleness to them, and sort of almost like a hope, like almost the idea that yes, there's a lot of bad things in life, but that, hopefully in good moments, good people can triumph, right? That's kind of the message. And I think in today's world, that message doesn't quite resonate as well as it could, and I don't know if that, and I think that's what I mean when I say that they have heart, because in many ways, George Lucas, when you look at his heroes, he's not afraid of showing them as vulnerable, right? Like he is a vulnerable, he's not really, he doesn't look threatening, right? Like, and of course it's because he's young, but he's growing, but it's also, I think, it's not just a matter of, I think it's a character. He chooses to sort of do the right thing, right? I mean, he could just, like, it's not, right? Or in the case of Princess Leia, right? Like, she's, running around kind of risking herself. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, right? She could just fall in line, right? Like, and so there is sort of a level of, like, they're bucking the trend here. Now, in the case of Han Solo, he might be a little, I mean, I guess you could say he's a scoundrel, well, he's supposed to be, I guess, according to his characterization. But at the same time, there's even he has a little bit of good in him, right? Even though he's obviously a tougher version of that. But like, I think the reason why I'm saying this is because a lot of movies today, they kind of don't like this. And you might think that, because they will do a facsimile of kind of, good versus bad, right? But they kind of just only focus on this. And focus on the Han Solo character is pretty much how all superhero movies today, right? They pretty much always, they don't even go through the story, the story of, how a person becomes a strong, or I don't know if strong is the right word, but how a person becomes someone, how does that happen, right? Like how, and so what I'm saying is, in the case of, stories today, I don't think they believe in good. As weird as that sounds, but I think today people think good, being good just means being successful, and success is not necessarily the right thing, right? Like the anti-hero has kind of become prevalent in our society. And not to judge our society, like perhaps, maybe the argument is like, maybe our society isn't worthy of these stories, right? Maybe we don't agree with the kind of the vision that George Lucas had. Like George Lucas, our characters, he's showing a sort of a benevolence. He's showing kind of what humanity could be. Like, it really is, in a world where it's not, even in the Star Wars world, I guess you could argue, right? When he went to the cantina, those aren't good people. Are those really people that someone like Luke would want to be around, right? And in our society, are we more like the cantina people, or are we like this, right? Because I don't see this kind of, right? There's a humility that these good characters had, even Han Solo compared to the society of today, that I think I really I think that it's different. That's what I mean when I say that George Lucas had heart when he presented these stories. Now let's go back to this. I think this is kind of a funny little, like a poster. Like, it's kind of idealized. I think it's interesting how I guess it shows what people think George Lucas should, yeah, I should probably make a separate video on this. So yeah, maybe I will. All right, so I'll do a separate video on this little picture because it's kind of interesting. So let's just go back to George Lucas. So George Lucas, like George Lucas, his films have heart, and I think in a way that makes it so that we don't. It's almost like we're not worthy of his videos, and it seems like every movie that comes out, it's like we've forgotten. As more time and time goes by, people have forgotten what it is, the theme of what the whole theme of what a lot of these older storytellers believed in, right? Because they believed kind of in doing the right thing, and that's not really popular today. And I would say that it's relevant today because so many of these old movies, they're still, I don't know why, but these old movies, people still like, okay, there's him and Jim Henson. People still like these old movies, I guess, because they can tell that it's good, but it's almost like it goes over the heads of people of today, because it just feels like kind of very, hokey, kind of not like we can kind of tell that they're not like us, right? It's like when you're watching like Little House on the Prairie or something, right? When you're watching some of these soap operas, you feel disconnected from it, right? Because our values as a society has changed. And even though there's a timelessness to George Lucas's message, it's pretty clear, but I think because we're so unfamiliar with it, it has a heart that our current society might be lacking in, perhaps. I might possibly be arguing. And so when we look at it, they don't see it. And in a way, it's almost like not only that, but even when they watch it, it affects how the story is seen. Because now, with the new Star Wars movies, they're trying to kind of change it. They're trying to make him a little trying to change the vision of George Lucas, and sometimes making the Star Wars films not be, make it a little more like Terminator. The one thing I think in one of his comments, George Lucas mentioned that, I didn't want my movies to be like Terminator, or, well, I guess that's anachronistic to say for the old movies, but he was saying this about the prequels, and on one of the commentaries on the prequels, but really he was revealing something that I think from the beginning, he didn't want it to be kind of Rambo. He didn't want it to be like, hey, we're just going to fight, duke it out, and that's it. Like, he kind of wanted there to be an element of a moral component to it, and sort of an idealization of what humans could be, or his version of that, right? without being ham-fisted, without presenting a specific ideology, but instead kind of just showing kind of benevolence, which is I think it's an interesting theory, and here's or an interesting way of looking at things. Here's Jim Henson, and obviously I would say he's similar the same way, right? But and that's why I think to myself, are we really worthy of the films, and are we really appreciative? And how his films have heart. A lot of the early films had heart, and it's not popular anymore to do that. A lot of the movies, it's not just George Lucas, I'm kind of using him as an example, but really a lot of the movies from the 70s, from the 80s, when you look at the movies in the 70s and 80s, they have this, you can tell that that they idealized the sort of the humble, the good, and the naive hero, and there was an appreciation for that. But in today's world, I feel like people don't want to be that, right? Like they don't want, or they want to skip over that. Or maybe, I don't know, but I sense that I don't see those same kinds of stories anymore nowadays. And that's why I'm saying that they lack the heart, and it makes it so that these stories, they don't, I also think because it's not just a statement, with George Lucas, and I think not just George Lucas, but any of these thinkers, or any of these creators, right? It's kind of a statement on life. What is life? What is the good thing to do in life? What is, and so you think to yourself what is life, and what is it really about, and what, and they're making a lot of these stories. They're trying. There's a hope for good, and I kind of appreciate that. And it also shows vulnerability. Like a lot of these attributes that I feel like are attacked, or perhaps we just don't want to see it anymore in art. It just doesn't. Every movie today, every superhero movie, it's just I don't see that level of humility anymore, and so it makes it so that, and what's weird to me is that in today's world, everyone kind of just wants sort of everything to be tough and ready to sort of almost like an action figure, kind of like full of something that is sort of it's just very repetitive and lacking sort of the vulnerability that humans actually have. I don't know, and not only that, but sort of perhaps, when they look at animals, I guess it almost seems like we're watching the more primal version of humanity, which some people, I see it's a philosophical difference. But what I don't quite understand is why is there an attempt to change the old stuff? Like with all the remakes that we come out, right? So many of the remakes, it's like, all right, we're remaking the movie, and then they make it into something that's like full of action and with a different set of values than the original movie, right? And they just kind of take the characters, take the storyline, but then the characters are, the heart of the movie is taken away. And I feel like that's what I'm talking about here, where there's a heart to what George Lucas's movies had. And I think that sometimes the new Disney movies, they don't focus on that too much, which I think was such an important part of this Star Wars film. And instead, they kind of just focus on the action or the technological aspect of it. But what do you all think about that? And what do you all think about the idea that that our society perhaps doesn't have, there aren't as many movies that have the same heart that these earlier films had, and that's what I notice. And they don't really believe. It's almost like we don't value it anymore. That perhaps it has become common to think or to interpret it in different ways. And I don't mind it, because obviously I think humans are going to change over time. But what I don't understand, or what I'm not too, I guess like what I wouldn't support, is kind of when we try to change, because our society is kind of for some reason we're obsessed with these older films and older properties, because these companies are buying them up, right? So I get it. But, really, why? I mean, it would be okay, but I wish that we would separate ourselves from it and not try to change it into our wills, try to transform everything into how we think, to our society today, which favors more of the distant sort of, not as like I don't know. I feel like our society is not as vulnerable. We're not as, we don't want to be as vulnerable as they were. We don't want to seem as innocent as they were. We don't want to carry those, our values have changed. So, but anyway, what do you all think? So subscribe for more videos where hopefully I'll continue talking about topics like this.